Hey everyone, Deathgrip here. Welcome to the Deathgrip Builds channel. For those of you guys who have been subscribed to me for a while, from back in the days whenever I used to post content on Save the World, you might be wondering, why is this hitting my sub box? What's this dude doing surrounded by computer parts? So basically what I've been doing for the past 2 years is building custom themed gaming computers and selling them. But also it's been a great creative outlet for me and something that I've really enjoyed doing. I started out by doing regular PC builds that were really clean, but they were kind of a dime a dozen. There's lots of other people that do that kind of stuff too. They look great, but there's not a whole lot of personality to them. So I wanted to focus on doing something unique that whenever someone buys it, they think, man, I've never seen anything like this before. This is one of a kind. And so that was my focus, and it's been doing really good for me. So I've really had a lot of fun with that. And I wanted to show you guys how I do that. So instead of going through the build and showing you guys step by step what part goes where and exactly why it goes where and explaining all that kind of stuff, basically doing a full PC build guide, I'm not going to do that because there's lots of videos out there that can show you how to do that, probably better than I can. So, what I'm going to do instead is show you guys how, with a relatively small tool set and a decently small budget, that you're able to achieve a lot of these really cool builds. Most of the time when it comes to stuff like what I do with these computers, you'll see big companies doing these kinds of things and it's quite expensive because they'll use like silkscreen printing or UV printing onto their panels, and it's those machines are quite expensive. So a lot of people see what I do and they must assume that I have something like that and that it's a barrier to entry and they can't do it themselves. But what I do is use vinyl and use what's called a Cricut Maker machine, and I can feed it images and it'll cut out those decals, and then I can use them to make really cool looking computers. So I want to show you guys the ins and outs of that. This first video, I probably won't focus on the software side of things for the Cricut Maker software, but I will provide the files for the projects. So that way, if you guys happen to get this exact set of parts, then it'll be one for one. And you can just take that project, feed it into your Cricut Maker machine if you have one, and then it'll just cut it out. But if you get similar parts, you can always take it and make the measurements fit whatever build you are using, whatever parts you're using. So that's going to be my focus. And what we're going to be doing today is building the Anomaly. So this is an idea I've had for a little while. It's been cooking, but I've really been lacking some inspiration. So sometimes whenever I don't have a specific like overall theme idea and I'm not like exactly sure on what case and stuff like that I'm going to use, a lot of times I will look for a very unique case that's going to give me some inspiration when it comes to building the computer and deciding the little different details in the computer that really sell the whole thing. So this is the MSI Pano 100 LPZ, and I saw this one on Amazon and it really kind of caught my eye. A lot of times when you see a computer that looks like this, you're going to expect it to be, you know, $200-300 for a case like this. But this was actually a really good deal. I was able to find this one used in new condition for, I think it was like $120 on Amazon. So definitely be checking those. A lot of times people kind of stray away from getting those used options from Amazon. But the great thing is if it comes and it's not like it's described, there's missing parts or whatever, something's broken, you can usually get it returned. So that's the great thing about Amazon. But this is the case that inspired this build. And we've got going inside it the beautiful XFX RX 7900 XT that I took apart and painted white. This is an excellent graphics card, a powerhouse of a GPU for the current market, especially for the price. You can find these things used for around $500 to $600. And honestly, that's a pretty great deal for something that's got 20 gigabytes of VRAM and is going to put out a lot of power for a higher end build without breaking the bank. So pairing with that, we're going to be putting in there the Ryzen 7 7700X CPU, and that's going to be going in the Gigabyte Aorus B650 Elite AX motherboard. A lot of the builds that you'll see me do are going to be utilizing AMD CPUs and motherboards simply because the price to performance is just unmatched when it comes to their competition. Intel has just not been it for the past couple generations. Even when they were great, the problem that I have with them is upgradability. AMD motherboards will typically last 3 to 4, sometimes 5 generations of CPUs. And all you have to do is when a new generation comes out, update the BIOS and plop in the new CPU and you're good to go. Whereas Intel, a lot of times they're like 1 to 2 generations, and then there's a new motherboard required for their newest CPU. So you're constantly dropping money on them, and they just don't compete when it comes to price to performance. When it comes to RAM, we've got 32 gigabytes of Clev Urbane VRGB. It's clocked at 6,000 megahertz CL30 timing. That's kind of the sweet spot for AMD builds right now. Mainly because if you go beyond that, you get diminishing returns in terms of how much you spend versus how much performance you get, because it doesn't really leverage the extra speed that we have available to us right now in terms of like, all the way up to 8,000 megahertz RAM. You're just not going to see hardly any of a difference in terms of performance. So this is a sweet spot if you're looking for DDR5 RAM. Then powering everything, we've got the Corsair RM1000X power supply. And when it comes to higher end builds, basically anything over $750, I'm going to be targeting A tier or B tier unit from the PSU tier list. And that's mainly just because I want people to feel confident whenever they buy from me that it's going to last and they're not going to have any power supply issues, that's not going to blow up on them, basically. So that's what I focus on. I really think that's important for my customers and my reputation, for people to be able to trust that I'm going to be getting them the best that they can get for that price. And then when it comes to cooling it, we've got this beautiful 360 millimeter LCD screen AIO from none other than the GOAT Thermalright. If you guys aren't familiar with Thermalright, they are an awesome company that provides a lot of bang for your buck. They typically have a lot of really cool premium features like LCD screens and stuff like that that you would really only find on coolers that are going to be like over $100, $150. However, this is coming in at sub $100 and is a great option, performs really well, and has a lot of cool features. So this is not sponsored by Thermalright, by the way. I just have used a lot of their products and have really been a big fan of them because of the price to performance that they provide. Then in terms of accessories that we have over here, we've got this riser cable for the PCI Gen 4. And that's so that way you can fix this graphics card vertical, because this case actually includes a vertical mount already inside it. So that's what we're going to be taking advantage of, and we'll need that in order to do that. For storage, we've got a Crucial P310 2 terabyte M.2 SSD, and especially anything over $1,500, I'm going to be putting a 2 terabyte drive in at least, mainly just because I think that's really reasonable for that price. I think a lot of people can get away with having that in a $1,500+ build. And I think it's just important to provide that value to the customer. So that's basically the roundup of all the parts we're going to be using today in the Anomaly. And we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll show you guys how it's done. Let's get into the customization side of things here. We're going to be using this transparent vinyl sticker paper that you can actually print on, and we're going to be loading it into the print tray face side down because this particular printer, that's the way that it feeds. The bottom side is actually what gets printed on, so make sure you pay attention to that with your own printer so that way you don't have any issues with it printing on the wrong side. After that, we're going to go ahead and head over to the Cricut software. Click on Make on the project window. Select which decal you're wanting to do first, and then click Send to Printer. I will usually turn off the Add Bleed function and let it print there for a cleaner resolution on the picture. And once it's done printing, double check the resolution to make sure that it is a clear cut picture. And then we can move on to the next step. Now that we have the decal printed, we need to take it over to our Cricut mat and get it aligned properly on the mat up in the top left corner, so that way we can get it ready to feed into the actual Cricut machine to cut out our image. As a quick little side note, when it comes to material settings within the Cricut Maker software, a lot of times when I've used the actual built-in vinyl setting in the past, what I've found is that it doesn't quite cut all the way through the material perfectly. And so I'm left with a more difficult job when I'm trying to weed out the decal that I want from the excess material. So what I've actually found is the best setting for me personally with the vinyl and other types of material that I use is actually clicking on the light cardstock option and setting the pressure to lesser. And that gives me a clean cut all the way through, makes it much easier when it comes to actually getting the decal separated. Now comes the rather tedious part of actually weeding out the decal that we printed from the surrounding material. It can be kind of frustrating sometimes, but it's just part of the process. You'll get used to it and get better at as time goes on. What I would recommend is getting the pack from Cricut themselves that comes with the weeding tool, a pair of tweezers, a little tool that can help you when it comes to actually applying the decal to make sure that you get it as smooth as possible and kind of eliminate the bubbles. And it comes with a kind of spatula like tool that kind of helps you maneuver larger decals as well. So that's what I recommend. You can use whatever weeding tool that you would like, but this is kind of the start of the process. And in here, you'll see me using kind of a loose technique where I'm just grabbing different pieces and placing them and kind of feeling out as I go. I knew that this would be the case because I didn't take a ton of detailed measurements when it came to the actual fan dimensions, and I knew that I'd have to adjust on the fly and come back and clean it up with a X-Acto knife and get all the edges nice and clean around the circles of the fan. And just like that, we've completed one of the decals, and now we just rinse and repeat for the next one. Something I wanted to mention, as you see me struggle to actually install this graphics card, and I don't even get it installed in this scene right here, I do it off camera, is that the riser cable that I use from Cooler Master does not actually work perfectly with this case right off the bat. The mounting bracket for the vertical mount, the standoffs where you're supposed to screw in the riser cable don't actually line up. And typically, when it comes to cases, if they don't include a riser cable, they will usually use standard mounting distance for these standoffs so that any brand should work. However, this was not the case, so I actually had to, off camera, go and use a Dremel to basically make the hole a little bit longer so that it lined up properly to where I could actually slot the prongs of the GPU bracket into the GPU support bracket of the case. So I would recommend if you're trying to replicate this build that you go ahead and look for an MSI branded PCIe riser cable. That should solve your issue.
And just like that, graphics card is installed properly and fits as it should, so build is saved. Next, you'll see me installing the cables going to the graphics card and tidying them up to make sure that they look clean and routed well. Something that I'm going to be doing next is placing the object for the centerpiece of the decor, and I wanted to let you guys in on some insight in terms of what goes through my thought process when I'm building these PCs. So that way you can kind of have some forethought and learn from mistakes that I've had to learn from in the past, where I kind of get ahead of myself without realizing it. So what I'm talking about is the placement of the object and the reason why I did that before actually placing the decals on the glass. So the reasoning is because I wanted the object to be placed properly in the right space and actually be able to balance within that case. I wanted to do the fitment of that first, since the decal kind of goes around the object. Because if I did the decal first and just threw it up on there without really test fitting the object, then I would only have one place to put the object. And if it happened to be not what actually fits well within the space of the case, then I'd be kind of screwed. So those are the kind of things to be looking at for and to learn from as you go through your journey of building custom themed computers. So unfortunately, when I recorded the footage for the decal as I was putting it on the glass, I didn't really have the best angle, so those clips are kind of unusable, except for these last two that you're seeing right now. So most of the decals already on there, but I figured I'd go ahead and show this anyways, because that is my intention with these videos, is to kind of show the customization part more heavily. I'll certainly do a better job in the next video of doing so, but just bear with me as this is a learning curve for me. This is my first video, so just be nice down in the comments. Another thing that I also wanted to mention is this particular transparent vinyl I had a couple of different problems with. As you can see, it's not super visible, even though whenever I print it out, it looks dark on the actual paper. But when I actually get it up on the glass, it's a lot more transparent than I was actually thinking it was going to be. And on top of that, one of the other problems I had is at first I was trying to just kind of place them by hand, and there were obviously some kind of misplacements on my part, and that happens often. But whenever I go and try and move some of these decals, typically it's not going to be a big issue, and I can just peel it up and replace it until I get it in the right spot. But with this particular vinyl, it's very sticky on the back, and so when you try and peel it off, it basically disturbs the adhesive glue layer on the back, and it leaves a kind of like non-transparent, ugly looking mess back there. And on top of that, if you're trying to move it to a different part of the glass, it's going to leave sticky residue on the glass as well. So it's just kind of not very forgiving, and I would not recommend it for that reason. I did later on in another project get some different transparent vinyl that was semi-transparent, and it makes the image show up a little bit more, and it was much more forgiving when it came to replacing already placed decals. So I'll leave that down in the description below off of Amazon if you guys want to go take a look at that. And I'll also include any of the other materials that I used in this project that are outside of the normal hardware for that matter. That way you guys can take a look and pick them up for yourselves.
All right, everyone, it is just about finished. So some of you guys probably watching this going, why did he name this the Anomaly? The inspiration behind that name is this little device right here. If you guys have never seen one of these before, this is actually a ferrofluid speaker. Ferrofluid is a liquid that has iron diffused into it, and it uses magnetic waves to basically interact with the fluid itself and cause it to move around. So if I simply hold the button down on the back, this is the first mode that it starts out in, and it's going to move around based off of sound around it. And so as I'm talking, it's reacting to my voice. But if I stop talking, it drops to the bottom. So that's mode number one. And mode number two, if I just click the button back there one more time, it's going to switch to doing its own random set of pulses. So this is a great one to use, especially because you don't have to actually use your voice to activate it. I think the noise inside the case, just simply from the fans, would be enough if you use the other mode, but I don't want to take that chance and just want to use this random mode. So that's probably what I will keep it set on. And whoever purchases this computer is welcome to change it as they see fit. But basically, we're going to be taking this and placing it inside this corner. And that's why you see this USB-C cable here so that we can hook it up to the back and it'll always be powered and won't ever have to worry about it running out of battery. Now that I've shown you guys this, we're going to go ahead and go to the final B-roll and show a beautiful shot of everything turned on. And we'll sync up this screen on the cooler with something nice that is going to match the ferrofluid design here and kind of set it all together in a cohesive manner.